Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
When your mother tells you she's paying 10 grand for your brother's honeymoon and doesn't even ask if you're seeing someone, you start to realize how deep the roots of favoritism go and how long you've been watering them in silence. I was sitting across from her at the dining room table, a mug of lukewarm tea in my hand, when she dropped it like a casual headline. Not even a preface. Just a cheerful little grenade lobbed mid-conversation, like it was the weather. We're sending Logan and Maddie to Maui. Our treat. They deserve it. After all the stress with the wedding and everything. I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. I nodded, took another sip of my tea, and said, "That's nice. They'll love that." And in that exact moment, I knew. I knew I wouldn't tell her about the wedding I had been planning for over 11 months. I knew I wouldn't mention James. And I knew that silence, strategic, surgical silence, would be the sharpest knife I could ever use. She didn't even look up when I said it. Just kept flipping through the Costco coupon booklet, her reading glasses slipping down her nose. She looked comfortable. Smug, even. As if she'd fulfilled some sacred maternal duty by giving Logan the dream send-off, complete with a beachfront suite and daily breakfast buffet. She had no idea I had already picked out my dress, chosen the vows, and reserved a tiny cliffside chapel in Portugal with a view that could hush even the most cynical soul. She didn't know I'd already booked the tickets. She had no idea James and I had been living a full, quiet life together for nearly 2 years, and I hadn't breathed a word to anyone in the family. You see, growing up as the older sibling doesn't always mean you're the leader. Sometimes it just means you're the rehearsal, the rough draft, the one who gets told, "We just didn't know any better back then," or worse, "Your brother needs more attention. He's sensitive." Logan cried when he didn't get what he wanted. I learned early on that crying just got you told to toughen up. He was the golden boy, captain of the varsity team, prom king. He once got grounded for sneaking out but still came home to balloons and a steak dinner because it was his birthday. When I got accepted into NYU on scholarship, they told me, "That's great, sweetie, but maybe stay local, in case Logan needs help while he finishes high school." So I stayed. I went to community college. I worked part-time. I helped him study. I babysat his girlfriend's dog. I showed up. Again and again and again. And no one ever asked if I wanted something different. No one asked if I was okay. That's the thing people never tell you about being the strong one. Eventually, they forget you bleed. I moved out at 23 and didn't speak much after that. I sent the Christmas texts. Showed up at Thanksgiving. Smiled in the family photos. And every single year, Logan's life got louder and shinier, and mine became something they glanced past, like furniture you've had forever and forget to dust. So when Mom said what she said that day about the honeymoon, I didn't react. I just filed it away in the drawer labeled reasons why you don't owe them anything. She didn't even notice how still I got. She didn't see how my jaw clenched slightly, how my eyes flicked to the window to calm myself down. I thought about the ocean that would be in front of me in a month. I thought about the dress hanging in my closet in a garment bag labeled conference attire, so she wouldn't find it if she came by unannounced. And that's when it hit me. They didn't ask because they didn't think I had anything to say. That night, I went home to the small house James and I shared. He was on the couch, eating popcorn out of the bowl we always fought over. I sat down beside him, and he instinctively handed it to me. No questions asked. That was the thing about James. He didn't need a spotlight or a big show. He just needed me. I told him what my mom said. He didn't curse or get angry. He just nodded and said, "Still want to go through with it?" I looked at him and said, "More than ever." Have you ever been the invisible one in your own family? The one who plays nice while others take everything? I wonder, if you were in my shoes, would you have done the same or worse? I walked to the bedroom and opened the drawer in my nightstand. Inside were 2 plane tickets, Lisbon to Porto, then north to a village most tourists couldn't pronounce. My name was on one. James's on the other. Tucked under them was a handwritten letter to myself, dated 11 months ago. It said, if they don't ask by next spring, do it your way. I smiled to myself, because it was already done. It was almost 2 years ago to the day when I first met James, and like most important moments in life, it didn't feel like one at the time. It felt quiet, unassuming, tucked into the corner of an overlit hotel ballroom where the carpet smelled like cheap wine and military-grade hairspray. My company had sponsored a veterans fundraiser that winter, the kind of event where executives in press suits shook hands with men wearing uniforms that hadn't fit them properly in over a decade. And everyone pretended the hors d'oeuvres were hot enough and the speeches short enough to care. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My boss, Mr. Granger, had the flu, and someone needed to hand off the donation check. I showed up in a dark dress that didn't fit right at the shoulders and stood by the raffle table with a plastic smile plastered on my face, wondering how long I'd need to linger before it wouldn't be rude to leave. That's when I saw him, James, standing alone near the back exit, drink in hand, looking like he'd made a promise to someone to attend and now deeply regretted it. There was something about the way he stood, not hunched or closed off, but not open either. Just still, as if he'd learned how to take up as little space as possible without disappearing. I recognized that posture like I recognized myself in a mirror I didn't always look at directly. He wore a suit that looked older than most of the people in the room, a worn silver ring on his right hand, and had a presence that didn't demand attention, but quietly earned it. We ended up talking by the coat rack, of all places, both of us pretending to be cold just to step out of the social noise. He told me he served 18 years, most of them overseas, and when I asked him why he came to the fundraiser, he just shrugged and said, "Someone asked nicely." I told him I was there because someone was too sick to say no. That made him smile. A real one, small and warm like a late afternoon in autumn when the air's just barely sharp enough to sting. That was the beginning. He didn't text the next day. I didn't either. It took him 4 days to call, and when he did, it was to ask if I liked bookstores or coffee more. I told him both, and we ended up at a used bookstore cafe where the coffee tasted like soil, but the company made it worth every bitter sip. He didn't talk much. He never really did, but when he did say something, it mattered. And maybe after a lifetime of hearing words that meant nothing, empty praise for Logan, placating noise from my mom, I needed someone who didn't speak unless he truly had something to say. James didn't come with fanfare. He wasn't flashy. He didn't tell stories to be liked or laugh to fill silences. But he listened. God, did he listen? He remembered things I didn't know I'd said. He noticed when I cut my hair, even if I only trimmed half an inch. And when I talked about my family carefully, vaguely, the way you talk about a bruise that hasn't gone purple yet, he never asked why they never called or invited or visited. He just held the silence with me, and that was enough. No one in my family ever asked if I was seeing anyone. Not once. Not after birthdays, not during holidays, not even after I bought a house and moved in with James a year later. It was as if they decided, collectively, that because I didn't bring drama or noise or needs to the table, I didn't need love either. Or maybe they just couldn't picture someone choosing me. Either way, I stopped waiting to be asked. And eventually, I stopped wanting them to. Planning the wedding without telling James started out as a coping mechanism. A what-if folder on my laptop, then a Pinterest board with no name, then a string of bookmarked Airbnb rentals in countries I'd never been. I planned in the margins of my days, during lunch breaks and late nights after James fell asleep on the couch with the news humming low. I didn't know if I'd ever use any of it, but I wanted to feel like I could. Like if I wanted something enough, I was allowed to have it, even if no one saw. I bought the dress 6 months before I showed it to him. A simple, ivory silk wrap with no corset, no tulle, no sparkle. It felt like skin, like something I could wear barefoot on a cliffside and still feel like myself. I hid it in the back of the guest bedroom closet, behind old blankets and boxes labeled taxes. He never went in there. I told him about the plan on a rainy Tuesday after dinner. We were washing dishes, and I said, I want to get married. Quietly. Abroad. Just us. He dried his hands, leaned against the counter, and said, "Okay." When? That was it. No fuss. No proposal. No ring shopping. Just the calm certainty of someone who knew he didn't need fireworks to know what was real. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell Logan. I didn't tell anyone except Aunt Claire, my father's sister, the only adult in my life who ever asked if I was happy instead of just asking what I'd done lately. I met her for coffee at a place halfway between her house and mine. We sat outside. I wore sunglasses to hide how much I wanted to cry just telling her. I handed her a small envelope and said, "You'll know what to do when the time comes." She didn't ask questions. Just nodded, sipped her coffee, and said, "About damn time." It always started small, the way cracks in concrete do, subtle and silent, invisible unless you're looking for them, and as a child, you never are. You think the world is fair because the adults who love you told you it is, and by the time you realize it isn't, the damage has already soaked deep into your bones. I was 8 when I first noticed how Christmas morning didn't look the same on both sides of the living room, but I didn't know it had a name back then. I just knew that Logan's gifts came with batteries and wheels and sound effects, while mine were soft, folded, and labeled practical. There's a picture from that year, buried in an old album my mom kept in a cabinet near the laundry room. Logan is holding up a new Nintendo, mouth wide open in the kind of scream that only pure joy or sugar overload can produce. I'm beside him, smiling politely with a pair of wool socks still half wrapped in my lap. My eyes aren't bitter in the photo. They're just resigned. Even then, I knew how to perform grace. Every birthday, he got a party. Every time he brought home a decent grade, he got praise. When I brought home straight A's, my mother asked why I didn't try out for cheerleading, just to be more well-rounded. She said it with a kind of sweetness that made it impossible to argue, but I remember how it felt like being stabbed with a butter knife, slow and dull but hard to forget. When I got into NYU, the acceptance letter came on a cold February afternoon. I was shaking when I opened it, not from the weather, but because I'd spent my entire high school life gripping tightly to the idea that maybe if I accomplished enough, someone in my family might finally see me. My mom was on the phone with the cable company when I told her. She covered the receiver, gave me a quick, "That's great, honey," then went back to haggling over a bundle upgrade. No one offered to help me move in. I took the train alone, dragging 2 duffel bags and a suitcase with a broken wheel across Manhattan sidewalks, pretending I liked the independence. I didn't cry, not even when my dorm roommate's entire family, parents, siblings, even a cousin, showed up with balloons and a hand-stitched quilt for her bed. I just unpacked my sheets and told myself I was lucky to not have the pressure of eyes watching me. By the time Logan got into college, a second-rate state school that didn't even require an essay, my parents threw him a party in the backyard. A catered one, with a custom cake that read, "Our star is just rising." I watched him blow out candles while Nancy leaned into a neighbor and said, "He's had such a tough year. Boys need more encouragement. Girls figure it out." That sentence clung to the inside of my skull like mildew. Girls figure it out. As if resilience was a gendered inheritance. As if my ability to not fall apart was a reason to ignore me entirely. The thing is, I don't think my mother ever saw it as favoritism. I think she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing by prioritizing Logan, protecting the fragile, polishing the promising. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the reliable one, the self-cleaning oven of her family. I didn't need praise because I didn't seek it. I didn't need attention because I didn't ask for it. So she gave it to the one who demanded it like oxygen. It all came rushing back the week before Logan's wedding, when I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a book I borrowed. My mom was in the kitchen, folding linen napkins for the reception with the kind of intensity you'd expect from someone defusing a bomb. I made the mistake of commenting on the cost of the honeymoon package, casually, jokingly, and she didn't even blink before saying, "You don't even have a boyfriend, sweetheart. What would we pay for your imaginary honeymoon?" I didn't flinch. I didn't even inhale. I just smiled. One of those hollow, polite smiles that middle children perfect before puberty. The kind that hides the fact you've just been slapped in the face with your own invisibility. She went back to folding. I turned and walked out, not saying another word, but every step felt like fire under my skin. Her voice repeated in my head over and over like a glitching recording. Your imaginary honeymoon, your imaginary honeymoon, your imaginary honeymoon. I think part of her believed it. I think she believed I'd never find someone because I wasn't loud enough, or sparkly enough, or good at needing people the way Logan was. I think she thought if I had someone, I'd have said something, shouted it from rooftops, begged for the validation that had always come so easily to my brother. But I had someone. I just didn't need to announce him. At Logan's wedding rehearsal, I stood near the back of the hall, watching him go through the motions of posing, fixing his tie, pretending to look humble as Maddie's parents gushed over his cufflinks. My mother sat in the front pew, tearing up at nothing. I stood still, unseen as I always had been. And then I saw him. James. Just for a second. In the back, near the exit. Dressed in black, standing so still it was like a shadow had stepped into the light. No one noticed. Not Logan, not my mom, not Maddie. But I saw him. And he saw me. Nothing needed to be said. Not yet. The chapel was smaller than I expected, more worn and lopsided than the pictures made it seem online, like it had spent its entire life bracing itself against the wind without ever asking for thanks. It sat on the edge of a cliff overlooking the Portuguese coastline, where the waves crashed so hard you could feel it in your chest, like a low drumbeat calling everything to attention, including the parts of me I'd buried years ago under politeness and habit. The stone was cool under my feet, and the air smelled like sea salt and old stories, ones that had outlived everyone who once told them. There were no pews inside, just a few crooked wooden chairs shoved to the side, and a faded tapestry that hung crooked behind the altar. James looked over at me with that half-smile he only ever gave when we were alone, the kind of smile that made me feel like I was standing on something solid for once instead of constantly treading water. We hadn't spoken much that morning, not out of nerves, but because some moments are too full to be filled with words. He wore a suit he already owned. I wore the dress I'd kept hidden in the closet for almost a year, the one that felt more like skin than costume. There was no bouquet, no music, just the sound of the ocean and the scrape of the officiant's shoes on stone. The officiant was a local woman named Lucia, who spoke with a soft accent and carried herself like someone who knew how to be still in chaos. She didn't ask for rings or readings. She just asked us to look at each other and speak truth. Not promises we weren't sure we could keep, not performances for invisible guests, just truth. So I told him the truth. I told him that I never thought I'd find someone who didn't need me to be small in order to love me. That his quiet wasn't empty, it was steady, and that I had spent most of my life being the background character in everyone else's story, but with him I didn't have to fight for space. I told him I didn't believe in soulmates, but I believed in choice, and I was choosing him today, not because I needed saving, but because with him, I never felt like I had to hide. He didn't speak long, because he never did, but what he said landed like an anchor in the center of my chest. He said that I was the first person who ever made him want to stay still, to plant roots, to not run the second things got quiet. He said I didn't have to prove myself to him, not with words, not with effort, not with pain. We kissed. There was no applause, just wind, and then silence. It felt more holy than anything I'd ever seen inside a cathedral. No cameras clicking. No awkward toasts or tipsy uncles mispronouncing names. Just the sound of the sea calling in and out like breath, and the hum of peace settling between our shoulders. When it was done, we stepped outside and stood at the cliff's edge, the sky bruised with pink and gold. The sun was dipping low, like it was bowing before the horizon. James slipped his hand into mine and didn't say a word. I didn't need him to. I pulled out my phone not because I wanted to ruin the moment, but because I needed to seal it. to burn it into the narrative my family had written me out of. I lifted the camera, turned it toward us, and took a single photo. Me in my silk dress, no makeup, hair a little windblown. James beside me, calm and solid. And behind us, the kind of sunset you only see when you've finally stopped asking the world to look your way. I stared at the photo for a second, not because I doubted it, but because I wanted to memorize it before I gave it away. Then I opened the messaging app and found her name. I didn't write anything. No caption. No snide comment. Just the photo. Sent. I watched the little delivered mark appear under it, then turned off the phone. James asked if I wanted to grab dinner, something simple and close. I nodded. We walked up the path in silence, the stone crunching under our shoes. The phone buzzed once. I looked down. One word on the screen. Moem calling. The phone didn't even finish the second ring before I knew what was coming, and I don't know if it was the weight of her name lighting up the screen or the years of muscle memory that warned me before I even pressed accept, but I braced myself like a soldier about to take fire. I didn't say hello. I didn't have to. Her voice exploded through the speaker like a grenade, sharp and high-pitched, each syllable carrying enough voltage to charge the air between us, even across the ocean. "What the hell is this?" she screamed, skipping past any greeting or pretense of concern. "Is this some kind of joke? A prank? You got married? You got married." Her words came in staccato bursts, as if the very sentence structure offended her, as if the idea of me doing something monumental without first seeking her approval had cracked the foundation of her carefully curated world. I held the phone away from my ear and stared at it, listening to her voice glitch and bend with the distance between us, the Portuguese breeze drowning out some of her hysteria but not all of it. Behind me, James was standing under a tree near the chapel's garden, pretending not to hear, giving me space like he always did, not because he didn't care, but because he trusted me to know how much of this I was willing to let in. I put the phone back to my ear just in time to hear, "And what do you mean you're in Portugal? With who? How long has this been going on? Why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you tell me?" There it was. The cracked heart of it all. Not anger. Not confusion. But that aching, jagged ego wound. Why didn't you tell me? Not because she wanted to share in my joy. Not because she was hurt I hadn't let her walk me down some imagined aisle. But because in doing it without her, I had reminded her that she no longer controlled the story. "I didn't tell you," I said slowly, "because you would have made it yours. Just like you made everything else." There was silence on the other end for a beat, not long, just enough for her to reload. "You had Logan's spotlight your whole life," she snapped. "You had every chance. You could have done all this properly. You could have brought us into it. But no, you had to make a scene. You had to embarrass me." That's when I laughed. A short, bitter laugh, the kind that slips out when a person has no idea how ridiculous they sound. "Embarrass you?" I said. "You mean by existing? By doing something for myself that didn't require your permission or your performance?" She was still going, talking over me, demanding explanations, lobbing accusations like stones, and I just let it roll. I let her unravel, burn herself out on all the things she hadn't noticed for 35 years. And when the flames settled just enough to breathe, I said one thing, calm and quiet like a scalpel: "You had Logan's spotlight your whole life. I'll keep this one." Then I hung up. It was the first time I'd ever ended a call with my mother before she did, and it felt like something sacred. I stood there, the phone still in my hand, not shaking, not crying, just clear. The wind moved through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear church bells, not from our chapel, but from a village nearby. They rang out soft and hollow like the end of something. Not even 30 seconds passed before the screen lit up again, Mom calling, and then again after that. She must have called 5 times in a row, refusing to let the silence sit. I turned the phone to silent and tucked it into my purse. Let her scream into the void for once. The texts came next, first from Logan. "WTF is this? Did you seriously get married behind everyone's back? Mom's losing her mind. Fix this. Then Maddie. Hey, just saw the pic. Congrats, I think. Was this real or are we all on punked LOL? Anyway, hope you're happy. Kinda bold though, NGL. I didn't respond to either of them. What could I say? That I'd finally decided I didn't owe them a front row seat to my life just because they'd never asked to be in the audience until now? That I'd lived so long in their blind spot that it had become the only safe place to grow anything real? Then, a notification from Aunt Claire. About damn time. Good for you. Took you long enough. That one, I replied to. Just a simple, thank you. Later that night, James and I sat on the small terrace of our Airbnb overlooking the ocean, eating bread and olives and drinking cheap wine that tasted like wildflowers and rust. He didn't ask what my mom said. He didn't need to. I told him anyway, not because I needed comfort, but because I wanted to share the absurdity of it. He laughed quietly and shook his head. She said she might disown me, I added, more amused than upset. He looked at me with a calm I'd never grown tired of. Would she even know how? He asked. And that's when I typed out my reply. One line. The only one that felt honest. You'd have to acknowledge me to disown me. I hit send. Turned my phone off. Took another sip of wine. The waves kept crashing, the world kept spinning, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a damn thing. We got back from Portugal 2 days later, tired in the kind of way that has nothing to do with jet lag and everything to do with peeling yourself out of one life and stepping fully into another. The house smelled like quiet and safety, like it always did when James had been there alone for a few hours, coffee, fresh air, and a hint of that old leather chair he wouldn't let me replace. I didn't unpack right away. I sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the wedding photo still open on my phone, and tried to absorb the reality of it all. Married. Done. No permission slips signed. No performances rehearsed. I didn't hear from my mother for 3 days, which in our family meant something was definitely brewing. Silence from Nancy wasn't peace. It was a storm cloud pulling water from every direction before it burst. On the 4th day, Logan texted, "Be at Mom's tonight. Everyone's coming." No punctuation, just that weird authoritarian tone he always used when he was mimicking Dad. The one that assumed his words were law just because he was used to everyone nodding on cue. James offered to come with me, but I told him to stay home. Not because I was afraid he'd say something wrong, but because I didn't want him in that house, in that stale, suffocating air where nothing ever changed and everything smelled like pine-scented denial. I told him I needed to do this one alone. And I meant it. When I pulled into the driveway, it was like stepping into a scene that had been rehearsed without me. The porch light was on even though it was still daylight, a little detail that screamed, "We're trying to create warmth," but only ever cast hard shadows on the walkway. Inside, the house was spotless in that aggressive way it always was before a big fight or a church fundraiser. Fake lemon cleaner clinging to the furniture, something boiling on the stove, just to give the illusion of comfort. Nancy was already seated at the head of the dining table, her posture rigid, hands folded like a disappointed nun ready to hand out penance. Logan sat across from her, arms crossed, already scowling like I'd stolen something that belonged to him. Maddie was there too, fidgeting with her phone, clearly not wanting to be involved, but knowing better than to skip the show. I didn't sit. I leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, heart steady. They didn't offer coffee. They didn't ask how the trip was. It was an ambush without camouflage. Nancy started it, of course, with that syrupy voice she always used when she was about to get cruel. "So, you've got something to explain." I smiled, slow and small. "Not really." Logan jumped in before she could answer. "You seriously thought that was okay? Blindsiding the whole family? Getting married in secret like it was some spy movie or something? You made Mom look like a fool." I let that hang in the air for a second. I wanted to see if anyone realized the irony of it, how it wasn't the marriage that bothered them, but the fact that I didn't let them claim credit for it. Then I said calmly I didn't make her look like anything. She did that all on her own. Nancy's eyes narrowed, but she didn't speak. So I kept going, slowly at first, then with more fire than I expected from myself. You want to talk about blindsiding? I said. Try being the kid who got straight A's while her brother failed algebra and still got a damn parade. Try being the daughter who got into NYU and took the bus to move in while everyone stayed home to watch Logan play football. Try being the one who kept quiet, stayed small, made everything easy, only to be told, year after year, that your brother just needs more encouragement because he's sensitive. The room went still. Not because what I said was shocking, none of it was new. But because I was finally saying it out loud, and they had no script prepared for that. You all treated me like the designated driver of this family, I said, voice rising now. Always expected to be there, to smile, to make it look easy, to clean up your emotional messes, and never ask for anything in return. And now that I finally did something for myself, something real, something that didn't involve your opinions or your damn Pinterest boards, you're offended. Logan shifted in his chair, like he wanted to interrupt, but I raised a hand and cut him off. No, you don't get to talk. Not right now. You've had a microphone your whole life. I'm keeping this moment. Nancy opened her mouth, probably to say something like, I'm your mother, but I beat her to it. I didn't tell you because I didn't trust you not to ruin it. Because everything in this family turns into a performance, and I wanted one thing that wasn't staged. One moment that was just mine. Maddie looked like she wanted to melt through the floor. Logan looked like he'd been slapped. Nancy looked like she was holding back tears, but not the good kind. The kind that come from pride cracking in places you didn't think it could. I turned to leave. You think you're better than us now? Nancy called after me, voice brittle. Is that what this is? I turned back, slowly. No, I said. I've always been better. You just never noticed. Then I left. No dramatic doors slam, no screeching tires, just the calm, certain walk of someone who's finally put down a weight they've carried for way too long. Back home, James was on the porch, reading. He looked up as I came in and asked, You okay? Lighter, I said. I showered, ate, let myself breathe. And when I finally checked my phone, there it was, a voicemail I didn't recognize, saved under a contact I hadn't touched in over a year. Dad. The timestamp said it was 3 weeks before he died. And I'd never listened to it. I stared at the little red beside the voicemail icon like it was a detonator, something fragile and final that could either destroy everything I'd just built or set something new in motion. The message had been sitting there for over a year, untouched, unopened, a ghost tucked into the folds of my phone's memory. My father had died quietly, the way most men of his generation did. Long before his body gave out, he disappeared in pieces, first emotionally, then physically, until all that was left was a hospital bed, a withered frame, and a silence that felt like punishment. We weren't close in the traditional sense, not the way fathers and daughters are on Hallmark commercials or sitcoms with laugh tracks and kitchen hugs. My dad was present but distant, not cruel, but also not curious. He loved Logan loudly and me silently, which is to say he probably loved us equally, but in ways so different it looked like absence on my side of the table. He paid for my braces. He taught me how to change a tire. But he never once asked how I felt about anything that mattered. So when he died, I grieved the space he'd never taken up in my life more than I grieved the man himself. And that voicemail, I didn't remember seeing it come in. Maybe I ignored it, maybe I wasn't ready, maybe the pain was too fresh, or maybe it was too familiar. But now, with everything cracked open and reshaped, I couldn't not listen. I pressed play. His voice came through the speaker slow and a little shaky, like he hadn't spoken out loud in a while and was still remembering how words worked. Hey, kid, he began, the way he always had when he wasn't sure how to start. I don't know if you'll listen to this, or if it'll even matter, but I wanted to try anyway. There was a pause, a breath, the rustling of something, maybe the hospital sheets, maybe his hand shaking the phone. Then he said, I've been thinking a lot about you lately. About how you were always the one holding everything together. Your mom never saw it, I don't think. Not really. She was always wrapped up in Logan and all the noise that came with him, but you were the glue. I felt my breath catch in my throat like a fishhook had snagged something tender. I sat down on the edge of the bed, phone still pressed to my ear, heart pounding like it was about to crack through my ribs. I know I wasn't the kind of dad you needed, he said next, voice heavier now. I wasn't present the way I should have been. I let your mom lead, and I stood in the background because I thought staying out of the way was the same as being supportive. But it wasn't. I should have spoken up for you more. I should have asked more questions. I should have been there. There was another long pause, filled with quiet static, the kind that sounds like ghosts humming between radio stations. You were always the best part of this family, he said, voice cracking like something inside him had finally splintered. And I didn't say it enough. Or maybe ever. But I saw it. I see it now. The message ended there. No goodbye. No last words. Just a final exhale and a click, like he had run out of breath or courage or both. I sat there for a long time after the message ended, staring at the ceiling through blurred eyes, because crying didn't feel like the right word for what I was doing. I was unraveling. I was releasing. I was finally being witnessed by someone who could no longer speak, but had still managed to say more in 60 seconds than my mother had in 35 years. I didn't tell James right away. I needed to sit with it, to let it root in my chest and rewire something that had been off-kilter for too long. It didn't fix everything. It didn't erase years of being overlooked or brushed aside, but it gave me something I hadn't realized I was starving for, validation without performance. Later that night, I opened my laptop and pulled up the photo from our wedding, the one on the cliff in Portugal, wind in my hair, sun falling behind us like a curtain dropping on an old life. I uploaded it to Facebook, something I hadn't done in years, not because I cared what people thought, but because I wanted it to live somewhere public, unignorable. For the caption, I typed 6 words and hit post before I could overthink it. We chose quiet over chaos. I closed the laptop and stood to make tea, already feeling lighter, freer, more myself than I'd been in months. But before I could even pour the water, my phone buzzed on the counter. Notification: Nancy Maxwell commented on your post. I picked it up and read the words, simple and sour like a lemon slice left out too long. You'll regret this. That was it. No punctuation. No explanation. Just a threat disguised as prophecy, a final stab from a woman so used to being the center that the sight of me stepping outside her shadow looked like betrayal. I stared at it for a long moment, thumb hovering over the reply button. But I didn't write back. Not yet. A year is a funny kind of distance, not long enough to forget, but long enough to soften the edges of things that used to cut you open without warning. It's been 12 full months since I stood on a cliff in Portugal with the only man who's ever made me feel like I wasn't built to be background noise. 12 months since I hit send on a photograph that cracked open the illusion my family had built around itself like a glass house already full of stones. And in all that time, my mother hasn't spoken a word to me. Not one. Not even a half-hearted holiday card or a stray text accidentally sent. Just silence. The kind she once used as punishment, now turned into some twisted form of protest. James and I live by the coast now, in a town so quiet you can hear the tide shift before the seagulls catch on. Our home is small, one of those clapboard houses with creaky floors and paint that flakes if you touch it too hard, but it has warmth, and it has truth, and more than anything else, it has peace. We keep the windows open when the weather allows, cook together most nights, and walk the beach in the early morning when the sand's still cool and the sun hasn't quite decided what color to be. It's the kind of life that doesn't need explaining, the kind that makes you wonder why you spent so many years trying to squeeze into someone else's version of happiness. Every now and then, Aunt Claire visits. She brings wine and stories, and the kind of knowing glances that say more than any full-blown heart-to-heart ever could. She doesn't ask about my mother anymore, doesn't bring up Logan or the baby Maddie is due to have in the fall. I think she knows the space between us all has grown too wide for casual bridges. Sometimes we talk about Dad, about the voicemail, about the things men like him never said until it was too late. Sometimes we don't talk at all. Just sit with our glasses, watching the horizon flicker in and out of gold. Logan sent me a birth announcement a few weeks ago, one of those glossy, overpriced cards with pastel borders and a quote about new beginnings printed in cursive so delicate it felt like it might disappear if you stared too hard. No personal message. Just the facts. Names, dates, wait time. I stuck it in a drawer beside old bills and warranty papers, not out of spite, but because I genuinely didn't know what else to do with it. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just read it and set it down like someone else's news in a stranger's newspaper. Sometimes I wonder if I should have screamed louder, if silence was really the better weapon or just the one I'd learned to sharpen best. I think about that kitchen confrontation, the way I walked out with my back straight and my pulse steady, the way I spoke all the words I'd swallowed for decades and left them there like glass on a tiled floor, daring anyone to walk barefoot. But then I wonder, did it change anything? Or did it just leave more wreckage in its place? Regret is a shapeshifter. Some days it looks like peace. Other days, it feels like a missed opportunity dressed up as self-respect. I don't regret marrying James the way we did, and I don't regret protecting that moment from the circus my family would have turned it into. But I do wonder if part of me wanted them to fight harder, to show up angry, confused, begging for an explanation because at least then I'd know I mattered enough to argue over. Instead, I got silence. And maybe that's worse. But there's something else too, something I didn't know about until Aunt Claire told me during her last visit. She said she went by my mother's house not long ago to drop off some old photographs. Said Nancy looked thinner, more tired, the way people look when they're losing battles they can't name. They didn't talk long, but Claire noticed something as she was leaving. On the counter, by the fridge, there was a drawer Nancy used for coupons and old batteries. And inside that drawer, tucked beneath a pile of expired circulars, was the photo. Our photo. The one from the cliff. Me in my dress. James beside me. The sunset behind us like fire smudged across the sky. Folded once, then again, like it had been opened and closed more than once. The edges frayed, the colors just slightly faded like time had been touching it too gently to erase it completely. Claire didn't say much more. She didn't have to. Some nights I dream that Nancy calls. Not to apologize. Not to make amends. Just to say something real. Just to ask if I'm happy not because she wants credit, but because she's finally realized she never asked the question when it mattered. But the phone never rings. Not for that, anyway. James asks me sometimes if I miss them. I tell him the truth, not all at once. I miss small things. I miss how my dad used to make cinnamon toast when I couldn't sleep, cutting the crusts off like it made it more special. I miss how Logan and I used to build forts out of couch cushions and believe that pillows could stop monsters. I even miss the way my mom used to hum when she cleaned, before Logan became her son and I just became her shadow. But do I miss who they are now? The version of them that let me slip away and never chased after me? No. Still, I wonder. Maybe she still looks at that photo in the drawer when no one's around. Maybe she holds it like a wound she doesn't know how to clean. Or maybe it's just a photo, and I'm the one assigning meaning to paper and ink because it's easier than admitting some things just stay broken. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. Some just end. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they're still waiting.